Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Time is money. This is a phrase that you have probably heard for many years, maybe since you've been a child. And this is a true phrase in many instances. For example, if you are exchanging your time for a paycheck, certainly that's when time is money. But time can also be seen as other things. Time can be seen as a resource. It can be seen as a commodity. Time can be seen as freedom or the ability to live your life in the way that you want to live. Whatever you call your time or however you define it or see it, there are a couple of things that are very true about time, regardless of how we see it or define it. It is a non-renewable thing. You can't create time once it passes. Once time passes, it's done. And in that sense, time is non-refundable. So that means that once you spend your time on something, you can't unspend your time on that thing, and you can't get that time back. Those two things alone should be enough for you to realize how precious and how important time is. Considering how important time really is, shouldn't we be more mindful and more protective of it? Recently, a couple of time-related concepts came across my desk that I thought were worthy of a podcast episode, things that I want to share with you because of their value and importance. Number one is the idea that if you don't manage your time, somebody else will manage it for you. What does that mean? That means that other people will tell you what to do and when to do it. And although you might think that this is exactly what work is, because when you work for someone, you have to do certain things at certain times, there is much more to that. There's a different level to that. Even if you're at work, if you don't manage your time at work, others will. Think about it this way. If you don't have a to-do list and you don't stick to that to-do list, it's a lot easier for those around you to pull you in all kinds of directions with interruptions and requests and tasks that they may simply hand to you. But if you are a true manager of your time, then your time is not up for grabs by everybody else. And if others want your time, they have to work within that time management process that you have in place. When you manage your time, you value your time and you're protective of your time. You protect your time. That means that others are inspired to value your time as well. After all, we lead by example, and that means we show others how to treat us by how we treat ourselves. So if you don't value your time because you don't manage your time, then others won't be inspired to value your time either. And of course, this is as applicable in our work environments as it is in our personal lives. So think about your own time management. How well do you manage your time? Do you manage your time? Do you have a concrete plan of how your day at work is going to go? Now, keep in mind that while it's important to have an outline of how we're going to spend our time, it's also important to realize that there will be times, instances, where you have to change, where you have to adjust, you have to reschedule things, you have to be able to pivot on the spot and respond as necessary because things come up, and that's reality. So we start with a definitive time management plan, but we have to go into it with the understanding that sometimes change will be necessary. The second time-related concept that I want to tell you about is the importance of keeping a written schedule, whether that's written on paper or electronically. Statistically speaking, we are much more likely to stick to something that we planned on doing if we have it on our schedule, if we have it written down. Writing it down, putting it on our schedule makes it official, makes it concrete. So this is an expansion of time management as we talk about valuing our time by properly managing it. Using a calendar of some sort is definitely a good idea to boost our time management effectiveness. So whether you have some kind of a calendar on your phone or on your computer or on paper, daily planner, whatever you're comfortable with, that can be tremendously helpful when it comes to managing our time and therefore valuing our time. The big takeaway here is twofold. First is the importance of time. Regardless of how you see time or how you define it, time is a finite resource. Time is finite in its nature. We have an X amount of hours at work, we have 24 hours in a day, and we have one lifespan within which to get everything done. The other part of that takeaway is that you have all kinds of power when it comes to time management. You don't have to be the slave to other people's whims and interruptions. It's absolutely up to you to manage your time so that others don't manage it for you. And how well you manage it, if you manage it all together, is related to how much value you give to your time, and by extension, how much value others will give to your time as well. Those two things are in direct proportion to the quality of your time, and by that I mean how much you can actually get done while at work or during your 24-hour day period. If you manage your time well and value it and guard it, then you are much less likely to be subject to distractions and time wasting and interruptions, which then improves the quality of your time in that sense, because your time is much more productive. And when our time is productive, when it needs to be productive, it's much more likely to free us up, to give us free time to do those things that we want to do things that allow us to relax and unwind. Everyone has taken time for granted at one point or another, but I think that tends to change a little bit with time as we get older, because we realize the value of time the older that we get. I hope that regardless of where you are in your life, you have been helped by this episode. I hope that I brought the importance and value of time to the forefront of your mind. I also hope that you realize that you have control to a much larger degree than you may have realized before, and you have the power to properly manage your time and to value it as much as you want it to be valued. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. As we know, time can be seen or defined in a few different ways, but regardless of how you see time, one of the important things to remember is that unless you manage your time, others will manage it for you. To better manage your time, it's important that you keep a written schedule, and that can be electronic or actually written on paper. When you properly manage your time, you give it value, and if you value your time, others are more likely to value it as well. How you value your time and how well you manage it are related to the quality of your time in terms of how much time you have for those things that you want to do. And of course, it's important to remember that you have the power to properly manage your time so that it's not managed by other people or circumstances. As the week unfolds, I invite you to consider what was discussed here today. How do you define time, and how do you see time in terms of its value? Do you manage it? Do you guard it? Do you see it as something precious? Or do you squander it? Do you allow others to dictate how you spend your time? Is time an ally for you that helps you to get things accomplished and have certain types of freedom for yourself? Or are you bound by time and restricted by time? Those are things that are worth examining. Take what you learned here today and apply it to your own time management so that time is aligned with you as your ally. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.